Welcome to a new episode of the official Catchup podcast. It's me, Ben, here, and I'm joined by Mr. Chris Pout alongside me tonight. Mozza, unfortunately, not here with us, but plenty to talk about, Chris?
Yeah, big news today, isn't there? Everyone's sort of going off on it. Yeah, it'll be interesting. This probably would have been a normal sort of podcast, but obviously a lot's happened since last night. So probably just a quick one today, obviously giving our thoughts and whatnot.
Aye, so we probably would have covered the games at the weekend and what's been happening the last couple of weeks in the Lowland League. But as I say, there's probably been some events over the last few hours that have came to light, and we probably want to talk about that. Just a shout out to our sponsors, Soccer Shop Direct. Check them out on Twitter at SoccerShopD, or check out their website www.soccershopdirect.com for all your football equipment and team wear needs. Right, so let's get down to business. It turns out the vents are closed. They are fully closed, Chris.
Yeah, I mean it's been a topic that myself and Derek, since we started the podcast, about extra promotion and relegation. It's something we've always advocated for, especially since sort of yourself came on the podcast, obviously being a representative of the West and Kilwinning. It's just sad, isn't it? It's like that whole parent thing. I'm no angry, but I'm disappointed. I think the Lowland League, it destroys the argument for obviously saying that the SPFL is a closed shop. I'm just disappointed with the result overall, Ben, because it's like what you said when you tweeted out earlier, obviously. I mean, I don't think anyone was expecting anything less, but it's still disappointing. It's like you kind of hope that the right thing's done, but you're not surprised if it's not, sort of thing. But that's just the way of Scottish football, isn't it?
So if you've been living under a rock for the last kind of couple of days, there's been a few discussions happening around the league. There was a suggestion, I think, last Thursday around whether or not the Colts teams would be potentially coming back for another season. And it was kind of then alluded to there may be a vote around that. However, what people were actually going to be, or the clubs were going to be actually voting for, was the changes in promotion, potential changes rather, in promotion and relegation within the Lowland League down to Tier 6. So there was a league meeting last night, and the clubs had a ballot between them. All 16 clubs that were involved. Obviously, the two Colt teams that are involved just now weren't involved in that vote. And as we understand it, I think we're talking about 7:30 on Tuesday night, that the vote went as follows, and it was 9 votes in favour of keeping relegation as is, and 7 voted to change the relegation promotion from the Lowland League to the Tier 6. So as Chris says, very, very disappointing to hear from the result of that. We don't at this point in time know the full kind of result in terms of who voted for what. I think we see already on Twitter a few teams that have kind of alluded to comments for and against by the looks of it. So I think we'll probably maybe delve into them in a little bit. But certainly as it stands, it's not good news for the Lowland League. And I think, Chris, it kind of shoots themselves in the foot a little bit. There's a lot of talk there about how Lowland League teams want to see kind of further promotion up into League Two, and if you're not an advocate of having that from Tier 6 to Tier 5, it seems like it's a mistake to make from their perspective.
You have to think about the bigger picture, and obviously we know about self-preservation at all levels in football, not just Scottish football, but it completely destroys the argument for me about having automatic relegation from League Two. It's not something, as I said, that we can agree with. Not only because we have ambitious, teams at Tier 6 and Tier 7, and all throughout the pyramid, but it goes back to this whole sort of sporting thing of my fundamental belief, and I know a lot of people agree, is that you're a champion team. You should have automatic promotion. If you're the bottom team, you should be relegated. That's just my way of thinking. That's the way it always was until, for some reason in Scotland, we decided that we're having split leagues and playoffs and all this sort of nonsense that's just like, why do we need that? It makes no sense to me. If you're the best team, you're champions, you go up. Why does that need to change? And for some reason, we always have these sort of experimental nonsense in Scottish football where we have splits and playoffs, and yeah, playoffs are exciting. I mean, in England they've got playoffs, obviously, but what is it, the third team in the championship against fucking whoever, the third to the seventh team or something. I mean, it's not the champions or the runners up, it's the fucking sorry for swearing. It just it annoys me with the stupidity of it all. And it's like what you said. I think the Lowland League has completely destroyed their argument. If you go up to the SFA now, we want automatic relegation from League Two. It's like, well, you didn't. You've got a 16 or potentially an 18 league team again, and you're only relegating one. Why should we give you anything? So it's one of those where I think they've just, like you said, they've destroyed the argument. And it makes us look bad for what was a progressive league previously. I don't think we can say that we're progressive now in the Lowland League.
Yeah, for me, it's a mistake. It's a big mistake. I think there's the two arguments that I think I look at, and obviously that one you covered there, Chris, around the need to get into or the want to get into League Two automatically, and the fact that we've kind of had that trap door and it's only recently just changed, and obviously we've had a lot of the kind of debates around things like Brecon trying to preserve himself, and eventually that's changed this year, and where Kelty managed to get up. But obviously we're looking at it from Bonnyrig's perspective, having won the league. We hope that they can obviously win the Highland Lowland League playoff and get put into the League Two again. But I think the other thing that I think about here is the teams at the bottom end. Now, you look at a team like Vale of Leaving, for example. We fully expect those guys to get relegated this year without some sort of absolute miracle of a turnaround. We know that Vale are going to go down. Now, if you only have one up from a playoff, Vale are going to struggle to get back into that Lowland League for possibly forever. I mean, they're probably going to end up down that the South of Scotland League,
East of Scotland.
forever. Sorry, East of Scotland. Sorry, got my leagues wrong there, but thankfully Chris corrected me. They're going to be in that league forever because, firstly, that's a tough league in itself. Where your teams like Trinent, Pennycook, Linlithgow Rose, etc., and then you've obviously then have to win that. If you win that league, you've got to play a playoff, probably against that West of Scotland team, and obviously there'll be South of Scotland teams that'll be involved. But you're looking at the West of Scotland team. Obviously, that's my domain, and I know the teams around us: Auchinleck, Pollock, Darvel, Clydebank, ourselves, even Irvine Meadow, look like they're coming back to form and are going to be a capable side next year. So there's no guarantees that a team at the bottom of the Lowland League are going to get back into the league. And the only way they might get back in is if, for example, they manage to get some sort of automatic promotion from the league that they get relegated to without having to play that playoff. Because for me, most of those bottom teams within the Lowland League are not good enough to beat some of these teams I've just mentioned, and they'll struggle over a playoff to actually get back up. So there's two things here, as I say, for me that it seems like it's a bit crazy to decide. I think we talk about being progressive. I think when I look at what happens in the West of Scotland, we've obviously got the kind of the relegation thing this year, where there's like 6 teams going to get relegated to align the leagues into proper leagues, and from there we'll always have 3 teams getting relegated, and obviously we'll have that one potential promotion spot for the playoff if that team can get through. So I think you have to lead by example. If it's something that you want within for your top end clubs, I think you have to show that willing. And I think we obviously spoke to George Fraser. I think this probably this time last year, roughly, where it was kind of discussed about the Colt teams potentially coming in, and I think he talked about the ventilation thing. I know that was the phrase that gets banded about now. Obviously, George is no longer on the board of the Lowland League, and that board came in, and you probably hoped that board was going to be progressive and maybe change make a change, but we can see quite clearly that that's not the case. And the Lowland League is just going to toil and toil away now. I think there's been a lot of flack around the Colt teams and those coming in, and we'll obviously we'll move on to that topic in more detail just shortly. But I'm bitterly disappointed in the Lowland League board. There's been a lot of comments on Twitter already. I think we've seen um, Tom Brown Senior, for example, from Civil Service Strollers, come out and say, "Oh well, if they joined as a juniors 10 years ago, um, then this wouldn't have happened." And I think that's a really crazy take for me to have from a team, and that pretty much tells me all I need to know about what Civil Service Strollers did as from a voting perspective. If that's his view as someone involved at their club, I don't think you can go back to the past in that detail and go, like, oh, 10 years ago we did this. I mean, if I bought Bitcoin 10 years ago, I'd be a millionaire, but I'm not jumping about a bit nowadays. You know what I mean? It's just the past is the past. The people that led the junior football in Scotland um, were well known to be kind of dinosaurs and stuck in their ways and have that old school mentality. And we see, for example, again, I'm talking about the West because that's my experience, but the people at the helm at the West are progressive, forward thinking people and really wanting to progress the football at this level. And I feel like they're doing great things from a league perspective around the different things that they're doing. And it's just that I don't see that now um, from the board at the Lowland League. Obviously, we've got new people involved, and those guys. I thought for me, someone like Chris Ewing would be very much a progressive type, and obviously I don't know how Chris or Cali Braves have voted, but that's one I would think about. Is there that those kind of people. We spoke to Tom Brown Jr. recently, and he was kind of seemed like he had a bit about him and looked like he maybe would want to do things, but I'm not seeing it from anyone in charge at the Lowland League just now, and it's bitterly disappointing.
I respect Thomas Brown Senior. I really do. I just think it is a pretty bad take, just from my opinion. And the reason being is because one thing he's not mentioned is the fact that you had to be a licensed club
This
to
is
get
true.
into the Lone League. And I tell you what, there wasn't a lot of junior clubs that were licensed back then. So
There'd have been none. There'd have been Girvan, I think, would have been the only one in the West, certainly.
the issue is you can't compare 3-4 years ago to now. I mean, we've got the West of Scotland League in now. So much has progressed with licensing and different rules, and obviously we'll talk about the Colts sides as well. But it's changed. You know, the landscape of non-league football in Scotland has changed. It almost changes almost every year, because we've got more teams coming into the East of Scotland, more teams coming into the West of Scotland. You know, so it's like it's just you can't compare it. You know, you can't compare the opinions and what was like even 2 3 years ago, especially with COVID. I don't know if the COVID has maybe affected things and how teams have voted. I just don't know enough about that sort of side of it. But yeah, I think in fairness to the Lone League board, would we have had this vote if it hadn't changed? I'm not sure. The thing that annoys me about and it's not just with the new board and it's not just it's been an ongoing issue with the Lone League since since we've covered it basically, is the fact that they throw out words like transparency, and really it's like what you were saying, Ben. If anything, I think it's got quieter. I mean, why was a statement not raised? Right, this is how member clubs have voted. You know, who was that transparency for? Is it for the member clubs? I mean, surely, as I don't think at this point in time any club has said anything about the vote or how they voted. That's fine. It was a secret ballot, as far as I'm aware. Some clubs have kind of gave them, inclined of how they voted, but I mean, if you're, if you're afraid of criticism for a bad decision, then it's kind of obvious that it's a bad decision, in my opinion. You know what I mean? If you're like, oh no, well, people are not going to be happy with us, then maybe that's probably because it's the wrong wrong thing to do. It's one of those. But the transparency thing bothers me because we've got probably I don't know who the media person is currently for the media. We've got this promoting games and everything seems a lot better, but what the actual things that people want to know, again, they're coming to us. It's getting leaked to daily record than whoever else. It's like that's not how you operate a league, in my opinion. People are asking you questions, you answer them through the official channels, and it's never been that way with the Lowland League, in my opinion. They'll talk about certain things, but it's always, oh, we'll give that one to the catch-up, or we'll speak to a journalist. It's like, nah, that's not transparency.
I think the thing for me is this is big news involving all of their clubs, and they haven't said anything. I think we were one of the first people to tweet it out about probably 4 or 5 hours ago now from when we were first chatting. Or we started this chat, and there's still nothing from the league. The league will have seen the Twitter account and all the people comment. You've seen managers from the west. You've seen people from the east. Even I think the east region have even commented from their account and things like that. And there's still nothing from either the clubs or the league itself. And that for me tells everything you need to know. We can talk about, I think, self preservation. Now I understand it from a club perspective if they see the value, for example, in being in that Lowland League, if that's a good value place to be. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure that it would be. I think if you, for example, were a West team, for example, or an East team, you're probably going to make more money in the lower leagues because a lot of these teams don't have big crowds and things like that, and that would be the thing I would think about. And yeah, you want to obviously if you're a club who wants to progress through the leagues, like probably many of the top end teams within the Lowland League are, then to get your other promotion spots potentially, you need to be shown example, and I'm not seeing it. When it comes to the transparency thing, I would have liked to have seen something from the leagues by now that said, "Here's the votes." I don't need to know the clubs. I could probably DM a few people just now and find out who voted who, if we really wanted to. But I mean, that's not for us to do right now, and I'm sure it'll come out in the wash. I mean, people talk. I think this is the thing that I've seen it recently with players, and a lot of players have been talking about players talk and things like that. But what maybe other clubs forget is that so do other clubs, and other so there'll be discussions and clubs within the Lowland League, the West of Scotland, the East of Scotland. They're not the most tightest of ships when it comes to news. There'll be someone on Pie and Bovril probably at some point tonight who'll know what team voted who because they're on probably a burner account and they're involved in a club somewhere.
And that's why. That's why another reason, like, take the heat off yourself. Like, obviously, you're going to get criticism if you voted um, what
Yep.
everyone's against, but at least you man, like, no, I guess no man enough, but at least you came out and said it yourself, right? This is
Yeah.
what we voted for. This is why we voted. But no one's doing that.
I stand behind your reasons, and I think if anyone, I think anyone, any club within the Lowland League, who's voted for or against this is listening just now. Get in touch with us at the podcast and come on the podcast, and I would like to hear your reasons for it, especially the ones that they voted no, because I like to understand why you haven't voted.
To be fair to the Braves, you mentioned the Braves earlier. Obviously, they do things for their fans.
100%, yeah.
I still can't get into the app, so I don't know how they voted. But you can't really blame the Braves for that if they go by their fans. That's fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, as a club, sure, but Chris is what the vice chairman of the league. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
So he's got a skin in the game in terms of the league itself. He's involved in those discussions at a management level. So we're talking about the transparency, the lack of statement. Chris has an involvement in that, and he could be doing better.
Braves have been in the past. I think in the past, in fairness, Braves have been probably one of the more transparent clubs. And I
Yeah,
don't want to feel like I'm defending them over everyone, but I do feel that, in fairness to them, they are probably a bit, and it's maybe because of the app and their fans. But obviously, in terms of the Colts issue, I did see a article recently where I think Ricky Waddle had said something. We'll probably get into the Colts a wee bit later, but obviously I think they're going to be voting yes again for the Colts, depending on what their fans go for. But I mean, that's another issue. That will...
just on that point about the Colts and the vote. We'll go into obviously the actual Colts scenario just shortly. But when we had that vote last year on the Colts, I think by that evening we knew every single team who had voted, whether that was by statements or club officials tweeting out or whatever, or being in our DMs saying, "Oh, I did this or I did that," and we know who did this or who didn't. So
The only thing I don't think people there might have been some confusion with was the uni teams. I think it was either no from Edinburgh Uni, or it could have been potentially no from Stirling Uni. I don't think anyone ever sort of cleared that up. But
yeah,
for me, this whole thing is it's not a witch hunt for me. I mean, at the end of the day, collectively they voted against relegation chances, and I think again, fundamentally, like I said, it goes against the idea of the Lowland League. The reason the Lowland League was created was to create a football pyramid from the SPFL down to well at the time amateur level, and it's just with one promotion and one relegation is just unacceptable. And it's something we've always advocated. I think Moz always was kind of wanting the free up from the South Scotland, East of Scotland, West of Scotland, but two would have been acceptable. But to not change anything for the next year or next season or however long it's going to be, yeah, I mean, it's like what we've said. It's barely disappointing. The build up is just. We've heard a lot of people from the Lowland League speak about this, and I don't think they were overly confident, but they did have those chats. But at the end of the day, we've ended up with the same result, and it's like, well, what's the point? What's the point in doing these votes if we know the result? It's like we're advocates for change, but nothing changes. It doesn't add up for me. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
and I think the thing for me here is the lack of ownership from the clubs who voted no at this point in time. I would respect a club much more if they came out to me and said, "Aye, we voted no, and the reason for us voting no was because X, Y, and Z. We get more money at the gate because we play our local rivals."
The funny thing is, Ben, just to sort of on that point, no one has to explain that. I think I've said it before many times. No one has to explain themselves to us. It's not us, but the clubs have a responsibility to their fans and their sponsors. So surely, if their fans are asking, I would suggest that the clubs do have a responsibility to the people that pay their money to go and see them. And that's the issue I have. I don't think you hit the nail on the head when you said ownership. There's not enough ownership from clubs, and there is ownership from clubs. I think a lot more in the east of Scotland and west of Scotland. If something goes wrong on a match day or whatever, I see a lot more from the east and west teams than I do from any Lowland League team, bar maybe a couple.
Yeah, and I think that comes back again down to that maybe progressive nature of some of the clubs that are involved nowadays within those leagues. Um, and yeah, absolutely. I think I think you just have to set by example, and by doing this vote last night just isn't doing that for me. And I think probably we could probably talk about this all day, but um, I think something we probably want to talk about then, Chris, is obviously the Colts, and it probably actually now that they've had the vote for the promotion relegation situation, it probably now ties in because I think the way that the discussions were going around on Thursday was around the fact that the vote itself was actually kind of there was like two votes in the same night, but I think in all honesty, it ended up being potentially, I think, a presentation from Rangers or Celtic or both around obviously the idea of them coming in for another season. Moz is not here tonight, but Moz has been obviously said many times on Twitter and on the podcast that this is a 1 year thing, and that's all that we thought it was. Did we think that there was a potential for it to be extended? I mean, probably.
We're getting called out left, right, and centre over this, aren't we?
Yeah, and
I
that
noticed.
that's fair. I mean, obviously we've got our fans in the West who I think have been quite vocal about it in the last couple of days. They're obviously big fans of myself as well.
Rightly so, by the way. Rightly so, right?
Sure.
One thing I have to say, Ben. One thing, I don't have any issues with people calling us out, but the thing is, the feedback we've got is that it was a 1 year thing, and it has been that way. But something has changed recently, where Celtic and Rangers obviously have put a presentation together to extend that. I mean, we couldn't have called that like at the start of the season. Oh no, it might get extended because Rangers and Celtic want to do a presentation to have it extended. We didn't know about that, obviously, and again, it was one of those things that seems to have been leaked to the press or whoever, a journalist, spokesperson type thing. Um, my attitude changes if they get voted back in, because I don't think at a year it affected anything. When you start going into multiple years, then it does. Um, so my opinion of the Colts being in the league will change if they are in the league next season. Um, we had personal criticism, borderline abuse, for our sort of neutral to, oh, I can see the positives, just for being able to spot positives because of people's hatred for obviously Rangers and Celtic and Colts teams in general, I guess. But yeah, it's like my attitude will change because it should have been a year. Will it be a year where it's still unclear because we'll probably have to see the outcome. I think it's going to be in the next couple of weeks whether there will be B teams. I think people, it's kind of like that. Oh, we got you moment where it's like, oh, you only said it was going to be a year. It's like, well, at the end of the day, it's like anything else. We just have our opinions. We don't actually make these decisions. We have nothing to do with it. We just comment on it. So, like, don't blame us if it's over a year, please. But it's like what I say, Ben. My opinion changes if it is over a year. Because guess what, your opinion can change over time. Certainly, mine has on a lot of issues.
I'll
So,
tell that to
yeah,
Tom
I
Brown
think
Senior. He doesn't think that's the case.
yeah,
Certainly.
that's part of football, though. Your opinion can change. Just because I said something on a podcast that a year ago doesn't mean I feel the same way or I have to feel the same way about it. There's certain things I believe, obviously, like what I mentioned earlier about if you win the league, you should be promoted. But yeah, the issues with the Colts over a year, I think, yeah, it's a difficult one for me. I think, like what we've mentioned, our take is if we could keep it at 18 and the Colts were out, it makes perfect sense for me to promote the West, East, and South of Scotland champions. But I don't know. It's the decision today, or sorry, the decision last night. It's kind of like I think even my opinion on it of how it's going to go has changed. I think it's kind of set up for the Colts to be renewed. Just I was always on the fence, obviously, with mostly what Moza was saying, but I think Rangers and Celtic don't do a presentation for nothing.
I think the thing for me here is that the 12 month or the one season thing looked like it was going to be the way, and I think for me as a West say representative, I didn't have that much of a concern about it. Certainly because there wasn't any teams ready to go get promoted that season. There wasn't a champion club within the West of Scotland, so no one really had any claim to get promoted into the Lowland League. So Rangers B and Celtic B coming in didn't really affect me in that much. I didn't have a particular view. I think could it be good for the league? I thought absolutely was, and I think if you look back and you can see there's been raised profile. You've had some players from both the clubs come into the play in the first teams of Rangers and Celtic, so that's obviously a positive for Scottish football. But I think the thing that doesn't sit well with me now is predicated against that vote. I think the fact that they've voted not to allow promotion relegation, um, increase promotion relegation from tier six, uh, just smacks of hypocrisy. If you decide to then have two teams who have paid their way into the league, let's be realistic about this. They've paid some money into the league to get in the first place on that yearly thing. They're obviously providing probably more money. I would imagine because that must be the driver for the clubs to want them in the league if they do vote for it, because I can't see like, for example, a footballing argument to have Rangers and Celtic in that league with a Colt team right now. So there must be something financial involved there that makes it worth a while.
We do need to debunk a few things though, because a lot of people are obviously saying the club's got the money. That's not never been the case. It was the league that got the
Yeah,
money. So let's not say like they're they're buying off the clubs because it's just a lie. And obviously, a lot of people you mentioned, obviously youth players. A few people were saying, "Oh, Scottish players didn't get the chance." They were the Colombian boy that plays for Rangers who went on loan to Partick. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, great progression," blah blah blah, in this sort of wido sort of sense. But it's like, well, it's not true. Look at Owen Moffat. Look at Alex Lowry at Rangers. People have had the chance. Scottish players have had the chance. It's just people don't want to see that. And I'm not defending the Colts teams, but like just be honest about it. Don't lie about it. You don't have to make up lies for fucking likes or whatever. But that's just the way social media is going these days. You know what I mean? And yeah, yeah, you don't have to lie to prove a point. I think the issue fundamentally for me, presentation or not, is that although some people would argue that attendances haven't improved and all this sort of stuff, there has been promises that didn't come to fruition, and I think that's what I would keep in mind if I was voting on again. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Fair enough. The attendances, I think it was a non-issue. I mean, look at in fairness, I know wasn't every week, but 300, 400 going to a Colts um, a Colts game is actually pretty decent compared to some non-league sides. You know what I mean? So having that extra few hundred, of course, helps the clubs financially. But it's not like they've been bought off with money before then. In the sense, I think they obviously had so much ticket money or something allocated to them or whatever. But I mean, it's not like I don't buy into this that they were bought off. I know a lot of people think that, but the money essentially wasn't going to the clubs. It was meant to go it's meant to go to the league. I think the narrative's just changed and it's inaccurate on occasion. I think that's the issue I have with it.
So I think then on that point, then I think that then it concerns me more. Then is if the money didn't go directly to the clubs themselves and it went to the league. I mean, what have the league done with that money? I'm not saying
Social
anything
media, I
like
think.
illegal. I just mean like what have they done to improve the league with money? I've seen nothing from the Lowland League so far that says the money that they've went out and got, for example, a commercial director who's then managed to go and get I think they did get a sponsorship, a headline sponsor deal recently, but again, no idea the value of that to be able to judge whether or not it was a good deal or not from that perspective. But certainly not seen anything so far. That the money I'd like to have seen maybe to help clubs. Um, Maybe make some improvements to their ground or uh, maybe help with the club's marketing side of things, perhaps market the league in a better way. Maybe employ people in the social media side of things to make content and try and grow that whole view of the Lowland League. Because now, to be quite frankly, as I see it, the opinion of the Lowland League is in the gutter because of what's happened over the last couple of well, certainly the last 12 months from
Certainly, a few people, the reputation of the league obviously went completely downhill with the Colts addition. Well, I guess us as a trio have kind of dedicated part of our life over the last sort of few years to talk up the Lowland League, talk up the clubs, and to have the belief or whatever. I'm not. By the way, I'm not naive enough to think it might not be about money. I think that most things are about money, but just to put that out there. But yeah, it is disheartening. The fact that you thought this is a great league to follow. This is progressive. This is going to be a fantastic league with the West and East, and for it not to come to fruition is a wee bit sad actually. No, I'm not going to cry over it, obviously, but no, it is. It really is sad because the times. The one thing I never mentioned earlier, we have been attacking the SFA and the SPFL and clubs like Brecon City for a long time, for their self-preservation, and now the Lone League has done the same thing.
it's
So
coming home to roost, yeah,
it's
100%.
coming. The chickens are coming home to roost, as you said, and it's just like it is disappointing because somewhere I guess we thought we had the moral high ground because we thought we knew these clubs and we thought. And I tell you what, some of the clubs, yeah, I'm going to actually point out Bonnie Rose. I think, in fairness to them, they have been true to their word. I mean, I would have been the first person to criticise them if they if they weren't. But I think they've been true to their word. They obviously know their roots, similar to Kelty Hearts. These ex junior sides. I don't think, from what I've heard, obviously, I think Bonnyrigg are probably, they voted for the extra promotion, as did, I believe, Berwick and Broomhill. They're the only ones I know about. Um, but in terms of the witch hunt, I think it was a secret ballad. So if the clubs don't say anything, then really we don't know. But yeah, fair play to Bonnyrigg. They're respectable. They've got integrity. The people at the club. So it's like in Berwick and Broomhill.
Just on the point of the teams that we mentioned, and I think from point you look at Bonnyrig's perspective, they're obviously at the top of the table. They're going to be going for a playoff against a Highland League team, and obviously their intention there is to get promoted. But I think they're probably looking at it and saying, well, if we were to get relegated down to the Lowland League again, we would want to see multiple promotion spots in place at the Lowland League into the League Two, so they can get a quicker chance of bouncing back if for whatever reason they did get relegated. But who knows what happens? And I think if you look at Broomhill as another example, they're probably right now a team that's in transition. Right now, they're probably sort of sitting kind of near the bottom of the table, probably one of the teams that maybe looking an eye over their shoulder at the teams coming up. And if they were to get put into the West Scotland League, I presume that's where they would go. That they would want to be able to bounce back into that Lowland League, because they are a progressive club. They want to try and progress. Obviously, they're not quite got their home in Glasgow yet, but it's one of those that once they get that and they can start to build a proper fan base and get that club on that right path, then they'll be wanting to potentially get back in if they were to get relegated. So I think that's the thing for me is that fair play to those clubs who have kind of indicated that they did vote for it because they see the reason whether that's from their own perspective or from a sporting integrity type view. They certainly feel like it's the right thing to do. But yeah, I mean, just to round up, I would say, yeah, again, it's really disappointing. But I think the question then that leads on to is where do we go from here? I think that's the thing um, that I don't really know where we go, and can the SFA intervene in some place and try and maybe can reevaluate the league structure and maybe find a way to make it right. I don't know how that works at that level, but it sounds like a closed door now, and obviously I don't expect that vote to come back round anytime soon. Until maybe a few years where you've maybe got a team from the east or the west or the south in there who wants that, who are a progressive side who want to probably get promoted to the League Two at some point. Maybe then that's when we can get it, but that will probably, as we now know, will take years to get two or three clubs from the either the tier six leagues into that league to then be able to get the vote to be able to make it happen. It's a bit like again we were saying before about League Two. It may come a time where we've got enough Lowland League or Highland League clubs in League Two who are progressive enough and see the value in having that further promotion and automatic promotion from League Two. But it's going to take a long, long time, and I think for me it's bitterly unfair on these teams that are investing money in licensing. I know from my own experience at Conan, we were spending six figures on licensing just now, and it's a lot of money to invest as a club to have to maybe potentially take 5, 6, 7 years just to get out of the league we're in. Yeah, of course you'll get the senior Scottish Cup, and you might get a draw that's favourable that gets you in the telly and gets you a big crowd and things like that. But that's like a waiting for the golden egg, and that's the way I look at it. It's not necessarily going to happen, and you also have to get to a certain point in that competition to be able to get that draw. I've seen it with Broomhill, with Hibs. They got a good bit of dough a few years back, and Auchinleck did well against Hearts recently when they had them in the senior Scottish. But that can't be the thing that we all pin our hopes on with this license thing. There has to be a proper pathway to get into those leagues, and there's no way back as far as I'm concerned right now as it stands.
I think people need to remember and maybe not think about it as that it's all the bottom teams that potentially voted against this. Because look at Broomhill, you mentioned that they've been a wee bit ropey this season. They're towards the bottom, and I know people have certain feelings about George Fraser with the Colts deal, and obviously we're pally with George, and we never went hard on him and all this sort of nonsense. But it shows integrity. It shows that Broomhill could have voted against it, or but well, we're actually near the bottom. We're kind of going through a transition, blah blah blah. But no, they stuck to their guns. They stuck to what they're about. I think Mozza mentioned it on Twitter, and fair play to the likes of George. George is, I think, in fairness to him, he's always, when he's been criticised, he's always tried to be answerable. He's came on the podcast a few times and tried to explain sort of things. He didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? And it's the same way, it's like we mentioned obviously about chairmans and whoever has, they don't have to come onto the podcast and explain their decisions. They're not answerable to us, as I said. George did that, and that shows integrity. And he got a lot of personal abuse, and we got a lot of personal abuse. At the end of the day, it's like me, especially with Bonnyrigg fans, obviously, I've said a lot of shit about them, but I always try and answer and say, well, this is how I feel about it. It's just an opinion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't have to do that either. I could just ignore it. But I think that's what I want to see more from, again, this word transparency. Be answerable, not to us, but your fans and whoever pays your players' wages. You know what I mean? There's got to be some sort of, what word did you use earlier? I guess, well, all in all, responsibility and ownership, yeah, if you want to tell me how you feel, it's fine. If you don't, you don't have to. It's just, yeah. Again, it's one of these ones, Ben, where it's just disappointing. It's been disappointing because I feel this has been built up for the last 3-4 years, however long we've done the podcast, and we've talked about it occasionally, and it's got to a point where it's like, yeah, it's just like this long wait. Now we're going to have to wait a bit longer. I think the reputation, not so much from the Colts side. I think this is probably put the Lowland League and the idea of progressive as, I think it's finished. The whole idea of the Lowland League being what it was even a couple of years ago is just dead now, and that's really sad. But I'm not going to blame it's not going to stop me going to Lowland League games or anything like that. But yeah, the idea I think that we all had of this progressive, brilliant league, really sort of good for Scottish football, is just it's turned into what we were criticising League Two for. Really, it's turned into another League Two, which is really sad to see.
Yeah, I think we do this podcast because we want to talk um, positively about this level of football. We're all involved in this level of football out with the podcast, and the reason we're involved in this podcast now is because we enjoy this level of football. We go and watch games week in, week out. Obviously, myself, I'm involved at a club. Moz is involved at a club as well. You've been involved at clubs in the past, and you go and watch Lowland League games when you can, and we're there to talk up the game. And we obviously we say we want to say good things about the league and the players and the clubs, and shine a spotlight on these guys, because we know there's a good there's so much potential in the level for people to go and watch. And we don't do this podcast because we want to be bashing everyone every week, but I think it's only fair that we do that when it's deserved, and I think for me right now it's fully deserved. I think I've taken a lot of heat in the last few weeks on Twitter, my own personal Twitter, from people, because I'm always negative about the level and in different parts of football. For me, that's just not the case. I think, yes, there have been negative about certain topics within certainly the west of Scotland, but I've also been pretty positive about teams and players and things that clubs are doing. And all I'm doing, and all we do in this podcast, is call it as we see it. For some reason or other, people have an interest in what we have to say. Rightly or wrongly, you can decide if that's the right thing. But we know that people are listening to this and want to hear our view. And obviously, from our perspective today, we were one of the first people to tweet out about the information about the vote, and we do that because we want to make sure the fans are informed, this is a major talking point in the league, so we have to come on here and talk about it to get our point across. I mean, let's say, you're still with us, then great, appreciate it. You obviously want to hear what we say, but other people don't, and that's also fine. You're allowed to, but I think just to probably wrap up the episode, I'll reiterate the point that we made earlier on. If you are a chairman or someone at a club, a manager, whoever, a Lowland League club who's voted against it, get in touch. If you're on the board at the Lowland League, come and have a conversation. Tell us the thinking behind some of the things you're doing in terms of like what you're going to do to progress the league. I want to hear it. I'm genuinely interested, because the other thing as well, if I can help do a good job and promote my this level of football and help you do that, I'm happy to get involved. I'm not doing work in football to make money. I've got a day job that brings in money that allows me to enjoy my weekends and do the stuff I do for my club. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to make this level of football look good. And I'll do my bit for my club. I'll do my bit for the West of Scotland Football League, which I've done in the past. And if the Lowland League want my help and feel like and I'm sure that I can speak for you, Chris, and Moz on that front. If we generally, if we have something to offer the league, then we'll would happily help, because all we want to do is talk positively about the league. But come on the podcast and explain some of the rationale behind some of these decisions, and where it's going to go, what the grand plan is. Because I think that was one of the things we got from the likes of George when he came on. As you said, he was happy to front it up and talk to us and explain the decisions and kind of give us a bit of insight. We don't see that from the league in general. So if you don't have a method of doing that, then I'm quite happy for you to have that vehicle via this podcast and have that discussion. So to get in touch is all I'm saying.
The reason the league is no longer progressive, because the whole vote against increasing promotion or relegation, whatever, it stifles progress. And we always talk about these ambitious clubs from the Lowland League, the east of Scotland, the west of Scotland, the south of Scotland. You can't stop progress. Well, in fact, no, you can by voting against it. But look, it's like the whole, we've mentioned a lot of sayings such as transparency and ventilation and all this sort of stuff. But we end on, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, I guess.
That's it. And as I said before, I get it, but at least own it.
Yeah.
If you're going to
Yeah.
be like that, if that's your view, you have to own it. And if you don't, then it makes you look bad. It makes the league look bad. Don't get me wrong. If I'm one of the clubs that have voted for promotion right or promotion relegation increase, I'm already commenting on my club account. If that was for example, me going and doing my job as a media person, that statement is out in, I mean, minutes after the vote. As soon as my chairman tells me the result, that I'm putting that information out in the public domain, because the fans deserve to know. I think we've seen it recently. I've had an experience of some news that we broke recently around one of our players moving on,
Oh, for
and
God's sake.
for me, it was all about that transparency thing. I think that the fans had a right to know like what happened there, and how that deal came. Well, not how that deal came about, but certainly from how much we got as a club.
See, I
Because
thought it was a wee bit cheeky that you mentioned the fee, but it was
yeah, I
still.
mean, I think it probably was, but for me, from my perspective, from the media side of it, the club was losing arguably their best player, and how do you explain that to a fan? That a player just disappears in a cloud. The reason the player's leaving is because we've got a good sum of money for a player who had 1 year left in his contract. Simple as that. We got what we wanted. We set a line in the sand of what our price was, and we got it. So that was why that happened, and that's why we did it like that. And I think for me, that's what I want to see from the clubs in the Lowland League is that going back to that point about transparency. Just tell us and own it, and let us try and understand it. I think you don't have to go into your kind of exact details by the, oh well, I made £500 extra a month in the last 12 months because I had Rangers and Celtic B teams in my league. If I go down, I'm going to lose this amount of money. You don't have to tell me the exacts, but just be honest and front it up and explain it properly. And then I think people look at you in a better light, because right now, as I say, my opinion certainly of the league is not a good one, and it's sad to see, because we've talked about this league for, well, I've been involved with you guys now for probably the best part of nearly 2 years, and it's good to talk about football. I enjoy talking about football, and I like finding out about the players and who's playing in different leagues, and keeping track. And we've obviously got our private jokes about different clubs and things like that, and that's what obviously makes it an enjoyable podcast. But I just just baffled by the whole thing right now, and it's sad that we're having to talk like this about the league, because that's not what we want
Yeah.
to do ultimately.
It's been negative for so long with everything that's happened, and I can take the personal abuse and stuff when I'm wrong,
We're
but
big enough
like,
boys, exactly.
but it's the fact that other people who they're actually responsible for these decisions. They're happy for us to take the abuse, but they wouldn't do it themselves. It's kind of like, well, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Taking the heat off you guys, And I don't mind doing that if it's you know. But yeah, I agree, Ben. Just a wee bit of, I keep fucking saying that word, transparency, but a wee bit of transparency. Look, that's all we're asking. Again, you're not answerable to us, but I think the fans would appreciate that a bit more. Certainly, you mentioned obviously Kilwinning. I mentioned Bonnie Rig Rose. I think they're good at, obviously. I don't think any of the officials came out about how they voted, but obviously we've heard through the grapevine or whatever. But um, I think I've got to mention Kelty. When I was at Kelty, if anything ever happened, they were always great at letting the fans know exactly. And that's why you look at Kelty as one of these teams with a wee bit of integrity. And I think it's maybe a junior thing. I think there's probably a wee bit of a divide between these sort of newer clubs and how it's been run in the juniors for years. I think that there is certainly a divide on a lot of different things, from new clubs to or community clubs, if you will, to junior clubs. Certainly, I don't want to go into other issues, but yeah, I do see that quite a lot, where there's a sort of divide in mentalities between certain clubs, of like your Kelties and Bonnie Riggs, or your Cumbernauld Colts and East Kilbrides, for example. So
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. These things happen, and that, I mean, football's about opinions. Everyone's like to have them, so there's no shame in having the opinion. But yeah, final time, I think, for me is, if you are a part of the club, get in touch. We won't knock anyone back who's prepared to come on and have a conversation with us. That's the thing. We won't be like fucking Paxman grilling you about it. We just want to understand your views. So get in touch, drop us a DM. I mean, Chris will be on the chat, on the official Catchup Twitter account. So drop him a DM, or we'll just moving quite swiftly on to how to get in touch with the rest of us. You get me on Twitter at Mr. Ben Grant. That's the best place to get in touch. Drop me a DM. If you don't do Twitter DMs, and I'll send you my number. I'm quite happy for you to WhatsApp me or text me, whatever you want. Give me a phone. Have the conversation. How do we get in touch with yourself, Chris, and the catch up?
at Rampant FM, I think I've sent most people my new number. Actually, not everyone, but yeah, I've got a new number. I don't know it off by heart, so I'm obviously not going to announce it on here either. So,
Wouldn't publish it.
but
Not a great look.
But nah, it's been an interesting chat. I think we got a lot out, Ben. Obviously, there'll be people that agree with us. I think, funny enough, we've not been in this position for a long time, but I think the vast majority of people listening will probably agree with what we're saying. So it's unusual for us. For the longest time, people have not been on our side, I guess. But hey, it's not about sides; it's about opinions, and we have different opinions sometimes. So, like, I think you've mentioned it before, Ben, but sometimes you and Mozza don't always agree with each other as well about certain things, and that's what's good about. That's what makes it interesting. Life in general, people having different views on things and different experiences or whatever.
Well, that's another episode of the official Catch Up podcast done. If you enjoyed that, then make sure you hit the subscribe button on all our channels, YouTube, whatever else. Hit the likes on Twitter and Facebook, and all the usual podcast outlets, I guess, isn't it, Chris? We'll be back, I'm sure, very, very soon. I think there's also more to come in terms of the Colts stuff in the next few weeks. So we'll be keeping a close ear at the ground on that, and we'll be the catch up's the place to get your news at the moment. As we said, there's not much coming out from the league, so you'll get it on the catch up as soon as we hear it. We'll let you know. Cheers.